It's Ashleigh from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and this video is a bit of a follow-up to my live video, if you caught that yesterday, where I started making these vintage bunny cookies. Now, I showed you guys how to do a little bit of this, but I'm going to go a little bit more in depth. So I am using some pipe and flood icing. If you don't know what that is, you can check out this video I have on royal icing consistency. And notice I did not use a piping bag for this. This is a very, very large cookie. So when I'm doing very large cookies like that, I just find it easier to spoon on that royal icing. This is a short clip from my live where I showed you how I painted on those flowers, and I also did some wet on wet technique on a different cookie, which I'm also going to make into a little vintage bunny cookie. I'm going to be showing you a little bit more about wet on wet technique later on in the week. If you want to see more about how I create those kind of brushed flowers, don't worry, we will go back to that in a little minute. Now I'm just freehanding a little bunny here. I want this to look more vintage, so I did have to look at a little picture, but honestly it never really turned out exactly like the picture. So I just made a little bunny silhouette, and I am filling that with some flooding consistency. Now, in order to brush these flowers, all I do is I take a little bit of piping icing, and I do recommend piping icing so that it doesn't just lose all of that definition completely. Then I'm taking a dry, kind of hard bristle brush, and I'm just brushing it through so we get those really nice strokes. If you find that the icing is lifting completely, that means that your icing needs a little bit more moisture, so add a little bit of water to it, but not too much. I first tried to use this technique when I was just starting out with cookies, and then I tried it again and again, and it never seemed to work. And I always found it was because the consistency of icing was not correct. So whatever you do, make sure that you always re-whip your royal icing to make sure that it's the right fluffy consistency. To give it even more of a vintage vibe, I did go around some of the flowers and added kind of a squiggly line as well. I'm going to add on a little bunny to our wet on wet technique cookie right here as well. I'm going to do it in a bit of a different direction. You'll notice there that I didn't really like the shape of the bunny that I created initially, so I just scraped it off. Now make sure that the cookie is fully dry before you do any scraping. And if you want to know how to dry your cookies quickly, go ahead and check out that video in the right-hand corner. Now I'm creating a bow, and I'm being very careful about which lines I'm going to create right now. Since I'm using flooding and piping consistency, I am going to want to dry those layers in between so that I maintain the definition. Same thing with the bunny's ear here. You'll notice that I did one section, dried it, and then I finished off the other section. Decorating cookies and wanting that kind of puffy look rather than a sectioned off lined look, which is how I used to do my cookies, is really, really reliant on the order that you do the cookies in, and it's also reliant on the texture of your frosting as well. I'm just brushing this out so there's not a definitive line, but I am going to be adding on these little Easter eggs here. Now it's really, really important that when you're adding on any of these things that your consistency is correct, because if not, you're going to get flooding everywhere. So you do want to make sure that your pipe and flood consistency is nice and puffy. After this bunny is totally dry, I am going to do a little bit more of that brush technique on the side just to give it that vintage vibe. I'm using my piping consistency to create all of these dots all over the place. You could do this with pipe and flood consistency, but then you would have to leave a space in between every single dot. Now I'm using my edible pen to draw on the eye, and I couldn't really decide upon the exact type of eye I wanted until it all started to come together. Then I'm adding in a few black lines here and there. I want to make it look a little bit more sketchy. Now you'll notice with this Easter egg one, I'm going back in, I'm filling in all of those gaps just to create all of that definition. So see how we have the eggs kind of stacked on one another instead of things all melting into one another? That's all about letting that dry properly. Now this is how I drew the other eye, except this time around I knew what type of eye I wanted to draw for this, and then I'm going to go ahead and add in those lines. I'm being very, very gentle, by the way, about how I'm drawing on this. Even though those layers are dried using my special technique, it is a little bit more susceptible to being punctured, so I do want to be very careful with it still. Then go ahead and add on whatever other details you see fit. If you were watching my live, then you heard I didn't really have a definitive plan for any of these cookies, but once I saw it get to that point, I really thought this cross-hatching would look really nice here. To create these lines may look really tricky, but all you're really doing is you're dropping and lifting those lines, and you just want to make sure that you leave a tiny space in between. Even squeezing pressure is also the key. So there we have it. We have our adorable vintage bunny Easter egg cookies, and I absolutely love these. I will never want to eat them, so more than likely I will give them to somebody else who hopefully will eat them and enjoy them. I briefly talked about how on my live, it's a little bit trickier pricing these larger cookies. It's a bit of a harder sell because you don't want to implement a minimum with this, but it's a lot of work. So I would only offer this as a stock order for $30. And for the smaller cookie, it would be $6 per cookie, and I would also implement that 24 minimum. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading weekly, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys.